Good morning, Chair. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Simon Calder. I am the travel editor for The Independent, or rather, I used to write about travel. Now I write about mostly the many ways we can't travel, or indeed sometimes get our money back for trips we were unable to take.
Well, Simon, good morning. Those are all themes we're very keen to cover in the first 30 minutes as you set the scene for us. So, as regards summer 2021 and holidays, do you think people are likely to be able to take them? And in what form do you think travel will look like if they can?
Yes, they will certainly be able to take them. I'm absolutely confident that particularly places like Greece, Cyprus, Croatia will be probably the first to open up. Clearly, an astonishing amount has to change. First of all, of course, the rule that all holidays are illegal needs to be removed. And the idea a year ago that I might even be saying that sentence is absolutely extraordinary. Next, we would have to change the current very, very onerous regime for anybody coming into the UK, which of course involves a test within 72 hours of departure to the UK, 2 more tests on days 2 and 8, and 10 days in self-isolation at home, or 11 nights at the quarantine hotel on Isolation Row, just north of Heathrow. That clearly is compatible with anybody travelling for leisure. And then, of course, the destination country has to be in the position of wanting to welcome us, but certainly the pattern that I saw last summer strongly suggests that there will be very significant willingness to accept British travellers, and the fact that the NHS vaccine rollout has been so incredibly successful makes me confident that actually British travellers will be welcomed to a wide range of destinations. It is, of course, deeply regrettable, I think, for consumer confidence, for the health of the wider travel industry, and of course for airlines, that you have the situation where the Transport Secretary is telling people not to book holidays, joined also obviously by the Home Secretary, Priti Patel, and also by the Labour Chair of the Home Affairs Select Committee, Yvette Cooper. So yes, against the barrage of politicians urging people not to consider holidays, I would say absolutely fine to book a holiday, although of course please make sure you book it through a proper travel agent, and make sure it's a proper package holiday so that you will then confidently get a refund, as Mr Moriarty will no doubt explain later.
Simon, thank you so much for the opener. And just looking, today is obviously budget day, and last summer when we spoke to you in spring, the committee recommended a series of financial support packages in place for the aviation industry. What do you think of the government response over the last year? And what do you also think of the current state of play? As you touched on, there's a bit of a dilemma between additional lockdowns, which, additional hotel quarantines, or lockdowns for those coming in, and talk of easing into the summer.
Okay, may I take your last question first and let me address hotel quarantine? Extraordinary. The line has been that you couldn't introduce this overnight, whereas as the record in Canberra, Australia will show, that's exactly what the Australians did in March 2020. Therefore, people were given, I believe, 33 days, 18 days warning in order to get in. And indeed, there were politicians who were urging people, look, if you don't want to go into hotel quarantine, get back from Brazil or South Africa or Portugal or the UAE before then. We were told it is absolutely essential to prevent variants of concern. But can I just portray for you the unintended consequences of this, which is to greatly increase risk for travellers. The red list, as you will know, 33 countries from which direct flights are banned. That is a flight ban. It is certainly not a travel ban. British citizens, as well as Irish citizens and UK residents, can come back. Therefore, if you look at the arrivals borders I've just done for Manchester this morning, 11:05, Etihad from Abu Dhabi, 11:15, Emirates from Dubai. Both of those flights empty of passengers. They are operating because they will still be carrying some cargo, but more to the point, there's people waiting in Manchester to fly out. to the UAE. So the government is saying you cannot carry passengers coming in, even though the flights are operating. So the many British people in the UAE, and of course there's strong connections there, are finding alternative ways via Istanbul or Zurich or Paris, which are greatly adding to the risk of travel. And so therefore you have this policy which is doing exactly nothing to other than increase risk, because you're effectively not allowing people to do the obvious thing, get on these flights. I'll tell you what, if you want to apprehend securely people who have just come in from the UAE, it's great to have them on a flight non-stop from the UAE, because then you can segregate them at Manchester Airport rather than, as we've seen at Heathrow, people mingling. So hotel quarantine, very, very concerned about. It does add to the picture that travel is wrong, that the UK is closed, and maybe we'll get on to the very serious impacts on inbound tourism. But if I can just spin back to, yes, your report came out on the 13th of June, if I'm not mistaken. That was 5 days after the introduction of blanket quarantine, which was another surprising move at a time when actually it would have made sense to export as many holidaymakers to warmer parts of the world with lower infection rates, and that the wisdom of that policy, well, it lasted 33 days so people could make their own decisions about that. The government responded to your excellent report in September. It made some of the right noises. Certainly the Global Travel Task Force Mark I made lots of very good noises. One of those policies, as far as I can see, test to release, was actually imposed, but all the rest seem to have fallen by the wayside. And here we are in the middle of an extended lockdown, with not only the government saying, I think reasonably, you won't be able to fly abroad until the 17th of May, but also this campaign against consumer confidence. And interesting, the Global Travel Task Force Mark I was very strong on trying to boost consumer confidence, but all the signs I'm seeing are that it's going in the opposite direction.
Simon, thank you so much. I want to bring in members to ask questions now in the 22 minutes we've got left, and I think we're going to start with Ruth Cadbury. Ruth. You're on mute, Ruth.
Sorry. So, Simon, what measures do you think could be enacted to enable international travel safely this summer? And of those, which do you think should continue or could continue beyond the pandemic?
Well, look, I think that most of the messages, and thank you for your question, most of the measures that we are taking at the moment are going to prove to be pretty transient. A very important aspect, I would say, is the certification. Now, in the Global Travel Task Force, one of the strong recommendations was that, we've got to work together with the international community on vaccinations. And yet, I'm sure none of the committee is old enough to have had their jabs yet. But when you do, you get something which looks a bit like a video blockbuster membership card. It's really not very impressive. And we have no international standards whatsoever. Those will come and they will be important. And if I can point to a country which seems to be doing everything right at the moment, I mean, we are going to see in May international cruising starting up from Israel. They've done, of course, even better than the UK in terms of their vaccine program. And one of the big cruise lines, the Royal Caribbean, has just moved in a brand new ship, and that is going to be sailing to Cyprus and to Greece. And I think that kind of steers the way forward. It is not going to be this great pan-European opening that Ursula von der Leyen kind of predicted or heralded on Monday. It's going to be very anarchic. It's going to be just every country for itself, because of course there will be some semblance of European Union, but ultimately Greece wants to get us before Portugal does.
Thank you. Do you think there's a difference? Do you think it's going to make a difference whether we still don't know whether vaccinations stop the transmission of COVID? We know that they stop serious illness and death. Do you think having more knowledge about that is going to make a difference, and there's almost got to be a plan A and a plan B?
Very, very good question. Look, everything, in my view, is an approximation. And that's why I get so despondent on behalf of the traveller who, a year ago was enjoying absolutely the best aviation industry anywhere in the world in terms of safety, in terms of value, in terms of opportunities. And now, effectively, the aviation industry has been closed down. Anybody who says it has to be safe, and that is an absolute term I have heard very often from the government, well, nobody's going to travel again. The correct phrase, I would suggest, is at what point do we regard the thankfully reduced rates of cases, of hospitalizations, and crucially of deaths to be reasonable, whereupon we will be regarded as presenting less of a threat to other countries, and crucially, of course, people coming back in will be or indeed tourists, if you remember them coming into the UK, they will be regarded as not so much of a threat because we've effectively vaccinated ourselves as a nation against people bringing in infections from abroad. So, yeah, it's going to be haphazard. Yes, it will depend, of course, on medical evidence, but there also has to be a recognition, I think, if there's going to be any aviation industry left, that you have to accept a certain degree of risk. And other countries have kind of made their decisions on that. The UK appears to be somehow managing to, in many of its policies, actually increase risk with very increasingly strict measures and a general message of it's very dangerous out there. This idea that that abroad is unsafe, that lurking out there is this very alarming world, and that we would all be fine as they are in Australia and New Zealand if it wasn't for people coming into this country. That's a message repeated by the government in London, the government in Edinburgh, by opposition politicians as well. And I think it does no credit, I'm afraid, to the UK. It's not really who we are. We've always been open and welcoming, but the message is most definitely going out. Stay here. You're much safer. And by the way, don't come in if you happen to be a foreigner wishing to take a holiday, see your family, or crucially, of course, do some business, because business travel is like the rest of travel, completely scuppered.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ruth. Over to Lillian Greenwood.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, Mr. Calder. When you last appeared before us, you said that you were appalled by the conduct of some airlines in relation to the issuing of refunds. Has the situation improved since the first lockdown, and have the Civil Aviation Authority and the government done enough in this area?
Thank you for a very good question. I was most certainly appalled. Just as a reminder, you would have airlines such as British Airways and EasyJet somehow making it tougher for people to get automatic refunds online and diverting them towards vouchers. Ryanair, and it will be interesting when you speak to Mr. O'Leary in a few minutes' time to get his take on that, clearly has a number of issues issuing refunds, as you would expect from Europe's biggest budget airline. I am, and I believe you'll hear lots of good figures from Mr. Moriarty of the CAA later. I am really concerned that not only are there still many people waiting for refunds for anything up to a year ago, they tend to be in the kind of overseas-based online travel agent sphere, where people are chasing after money which appears to have been refunded but never finds its way to the consumer. But I'm also very concerned about the lack of teeth that the Civil Aviation Authority still has after it has said we'd like more powers, after you on the committee have said it should have more powers, and after the government has kind of said, yeah, we want to give it more powers. At the moment, if I'm not mistaken, I don't know if any of you remember the Ryanair pilots debacle, where the rosters all went wrong and they cancelled loads of flights and they were told they had to refund or rebook people. Well, that happened, I think, in 2018. I don't think it's come to court yet, which is gives you some idea of the pace that the CAA has to work on with its powers under the Enterprise Act. So, yeah, things are much better, but actually, Mr. Greenwood, that's largely because hardly anybody has been booking anything because they've been told, oh, you don't want to book a holiday.
So in the unfortunate circumstance, if things got worse again, I don't know, next winter and people had flight books, do you think we could find ourselves in pretty much the same situation?
It wouldn't be the same situation simply because I think we'll hear more from the airline point of view, but booking horizons are much shorter. I mean, as soon as I'm able to get out of the country, I will be the first one at the airport at check-in, but I haven't got anything booked at the moment because there's simply so much uncertainty. And I think an awful lot of people, yeah, great, book a holiday for August, by all means, absolutely terrific. If you've got family, if you want to lock into a particular deal in a particular location, that's great. But since I hope soon to resume my normal lifestyle of being on holiday while pretending to work, I'm just going to sort of take whatever opportunities there are. And I think short-term booking horizons will most certainly be the order of the day. So we are not going to find ourselves in the same position where you have millions of people desperately trying to get refunds for trips that plainly couldn't go ahead.
So as the industry tries to rebuild that consumer confidence, should more of the airlines and travel companies adopt a trust account model so that, you know, it safeguards customers' money and it can be much more easily refunded in the circumstances where flights or holidays can't go ahead or people can't go on them?
That's a great question, and in a perfect world, absolutely. But travel, as you know, is very cash positive, and we created this extraordinary aviation industry, genuinely world leading, as well as a brilliant wider travel industry, on the basis of the old model, which is that I might book for a trip 6 months ahead, and the tour operator or the airline will use that to pay the cost it's incurred for your trip, which is next week. And that clearly has been exposed as a far from ideal business model in terms of leaving so many people short of so many millions of pounds over the during the pandemic. In a perfect world, of course, it would be locked in until you step back from your plane onto UK soil, having had a fantastic holiday, I hope, and then the money all goes through.
So will the model change? And if it did change, what would that mean for prices?
Well, they would undoubtedly go up, and they would almost certainly be, because it would have the effect of raising barriers to entry very significantly. It would probably, I think, cause more consumer harm than benefits. However, I hope that one silver lining out of this terrible tragedy is that consumers will be much more attuned to issues of refunds, of consumer protection, and if I may just name check trail finders who've always had effectively a trust account model. They will be perhaps going to suppliers who they know will give them travel counsellors also doing a very good job with that, going to suppliers who will refund very speedily and in full without any quibble.
Thank you very much, Chair.
Lillian, thank you. So we talked a bit about price there. Do you think there is a danger that consumers will end up being charged more because airports and airlines understandably have to claw back the losses that they have incurred over the last fallow year?
Undoubtedly, and it's not actually going to be, I don't think, Chair, a direct reaction, which is that Mr. Merriman paid 50 quid for his flight to Nice last year. We're going to charge him 60 because we've got to claw that back. It will simply be that during the restart, we will see a lot less capacity offered, partly because the last thing any airline which has been losing millions of pounds a day wants to do is expose itself to yet more losses, but also that will have the beneficial effect from their point of view of, if demand does return at scale, of keeping prices high. We will be paying more, we will have less choice. And there will be other issues, and I'm interested to hear what the airport representatives will be saying shortly, the impact of charges, because of course the airport model, where you've got extremely high fixed charges, very low marginal costs, that is going to have to be addressed if we're going to have a functioning airport industry. And already, of course, Heathrow, which has been in absolute terms far harder hit than other airports, although not in relative terms, is already looking at its whole charging structure along with the CAA, and that might be an interesting question for Mr. Moriarty. So we will be paying more, we'll be getting less, but look, I've got a long memory, and if you go back to the very much bad old days before the likes of Ryanair and EasyJet opened up aviation, before we had open skies in Europe, we tolerated really high prices, really poor service, and low range of options. Now, we will come back, but it's just a question, at what point do we come back? At the moment, it's looking like something like 2005, which isn't great in terms of availability and price. So, yeah, we've been having this wonderful, virtuous falling over time of fares, expanding of opportunities, and that is most certainly going into reverse.
Okay, thank you. I want to bring in our newest recruit as a member. Welcome, Ben Bradshaw.
Thank you, Chair. Simon, can I take you back to what you described as the model you expect to operate here post May the 17th? You mentioned Israel, but is it your expectation that the quarantines, the testing fall away and they're replaced by COVID passports? And if so, what about people who by that stage have not been vaccinated? I mean, last summer we had air corridors, which were pretty free to the countries that were on the corridor. Are you thinking we'll have a less permissive approach this summer, or a more permissive approach applying to more countries?
Very good question. I would say it's going to be pretty much the same in terms of the attitude. You're absolutely right. If we go back to last summer, effectively, and I've got a whole wodge of passenger forms that I filled in for Spain, for Italy, for Portugal, for Greece, none of which was ever looked at. And that was all you needed to do at the airport before you left. Now, I dare say that we will move towards a model of having a test prior to departure that will be much swifter, much cheaper than we're used to, and it will almost be blended into the airport experience. So you park the car, you have your test, you go and check in, you sit around in duty free, etc. And the same in the other direction. That's going to take, that will require the government here to say, we are going to, from a number of destinations, and I certainly don't expect the blanket restrictions to be lifted en masse, but we're clearly looking at infection rates and variants of concern and so on. I expect them to say, we will let you in with one test before departure, and hopefully the innovations that we're seeing, for instance, at Edinburgh Airport, where they're imposing, that they've deployed really good testing possibilities. Yes, it's not as good as a PCR test, but it is so much cheaper and easier. If you want to restart things, that I think is going to be the model. So I'm looking forward to going to whichever places I can go to. I'm guessing that they're going to be along the lines of Greece, Cyprus and Croatia, but they will not require everybody to be vaccinated. If you look at what the Greek tourism minister Theo Harris has been saying, he's been, I think the term is persuading people. He keeps talking about, fantastic, you've had both jabs, in you come, and we're all picturing ourselves sitting at the taverna overlooking the water at sunset with a nice glass of mythos. Well, I am. And so that is doing really well in kind of marketing Greece as somewhere that's going to be really open to the people who've had their jabs. But crucially, the Greeks are not going to say, you can leave the kids at home because they haven't had theirs. They're just going to say something like, right, you don't have a pre-departure test, or you don't need to fill in a long and complicated form. They will be pragmatic about it. And I think that's going to be the model that's going to be happening everywhere, with Ms. von der Leyen in Brussels desperately trying to keep people in order, but I don't think she will manage to herd those particular tourism cats.
But Simon, given that you sound so confident we will all be going on foreign holidays this summer, Why haven't you booked anything? I mean, that's being very cautious, isn't it? I mean, the prices are very low at the moment, and they're bound to go up as soon as people do really think it's going to happen.
Yes.
And given the capacity problems you mentioned, prices are going to shoot up. So it's best to book now.
Oh, well, yeah, absolutely. And look, many people who do want to lock into the prices, yeah, I urge you to do that. I'm just fed up, as I'm sure some of the honourable members are, and many of the public are, just reclaiming getting the refunds from trips last year. And rather than have all that kerfuffle, I would rather just be sitting here poised, ready the second that Mr. Shapps, the Transport Secretary, says you can go to country X. I will be booking my flight. I'm hugely confident that I'm going to be able to travel. I'm hugely confident that I'm going to try and make up for lost time and spend as freely as I can, both in the UK and beyond, because tourism has been an immense force for good, spreading wealth to poorer countries, bringing immense riches to the UK, benefiting us from the fact that, here in London, one reason we've got such a fantastic range of restaurants, hotels, tourist attractions is because generally foreign people like coming here and they support those. So immense benefits, and that not even mentioning the great social and economic benefits that aviation has brought us since the start of the 21st century.
Last question from us, Simon. What do you say to those constituents of ours who contact us and say it's not right that they should have to prove whether they've had a vaccine or not? It's Big Brother. It's an infringement of their human rights. What do you say to those people? Well,
I'm absolutely spot on with that question. It's a really tricky one, but I'm afraid it's already happening. The market is going to trump morality, I'm afraid. It's just look at what Saga Cruises is saying. I realise that none of you would qualify, but in order to go on one, you have to be over 50 over 50 and had both your vaccinations and waited 2 weeks. They're making a perfectly, I think, reasonable commercial decision. And yes, that is certainly going to disadvantage some people who, for medical reasons, for their own personal reasons, haven't had the vaccine. But I'm afraid that's what the world is like. You can't go to a large number of countries in the tropics, in Africa, in Latin America, without a yellow fever vaccine. And I'm afraid it's the same, ultimately, the traveller's choice combined with the rules of the country. So we will see individual countries saying, you've got to have a vaccine to come in, as they already are with Estonia, with Romania, with Georgia, with Poland. You forget all the quarantine and testing rules. So that's just absolutely going to happen. I would add that the model of countries vaccinating themselves against tourism is also going to become quite lively. The Seychelles is hoping to achieve that status this month. So it's going to be a mess of different models. And of course, the wider picture is that the world needs to be confident about the trajectory of infection rates. Meanwhile, aviation just does the best it can.
Simon, as ever, thank you so much for setting the scene for us. It's great to see you again, and on behalf of us all, wish you very well and hope you'll get some answers to some of the questions you